Rounders actually ends with the hero winning the entry fee to the main event of the World Series of Poker. I did that about 6 months ago, and I promised to get to that story in depth in another vlog at another time. Outside of my immediate family, who has a vested interest in me winning at poker in order to buy food, my biggest fan is my older brother Scott, who lives alone about 100 miles east of my house and plays cash games at his local casino in Central California. Scott isn't a great player, but I wrote out some strategies for him and he developed into a slightly winning player, and those strategies actually closed some holes in my game. A week after I got back from the World Series, at his casino, Scott got hot, and I was not 100 miles away at mine. He'd call me and tell me how smart I was and how those strategies really helped him win. And to tell you the truth, I can't tell you I was exactly happy with that situation. But November was really good to me on the Veldt, and on a cold night on December 9th, my wife and I decided to treat ourselves by driving to our totally unsponsored superstore and buying a 70-inch TV. I'd just spent the entire previous day at our niece's wedding, and now all I wanted to do was mount the TV, sit down, relax, and watch, when Scott called a few times. I answered the third time, and he told me he got his aces cracked a couple days ago, and now he was sick as a dog, both mentally and physically, and all he wanted to do was watch TV, but he couldn't do it because the Android box I got him a couple months ago wasn't working. I then learned explaining simple technology to a 63-year-old is impossible. And after an hour, I told him I was just busy with other things, and I don't have time for his whining about getting his aces cracked, and he should just man up and deal with it. Our fight ended with him politely thanking me for my time as we said goodnight. He died 4 days later, and that was our last conversation. And this genius has to live with that. A week after our conversation, I was driving to a casino about an hour west of my house with Mrs. Creepy. She likes the slots, and I love the tables. I decided I was no longer mad at Scott and called him on the way. It was Saturday night, and when he didn't answer, I just figured he was busy with friends. Want to get in touch with the lighter side of poker? Get to know him. No, not him. Him and others as you turn your phone the other way and search for Mr. Creepy's shorts. Fun, funny, and strange in under 60 seconds. You'll love this guy. I'm Mr. Creepy. This is my train. Let's go to school. If you're new to poker, you are going to learn something about poker terminology and blind structure in about 30 seconds. I'm sorry, but I'm going to go fast. If you've been playing poker for years and think you know everything, you don't. And if you hang with for 90 seconds while I catch up the class, I promise I'm going to teach you something new. I'd have a reference for you, but he literally just died. Although I don't know it yet. If you want validity to any aspect of the story, drive to the Central Valley of California, find a poker dealer named Nye, piss him off by telling him Buster Posey single-handedly ruined baseball, wait for him to say, "You know McLovin." Tell him, well, he's Mr. Creepy now, and tell him to watch this video because I currently have 0 views and 0 subscribers, and if this thing doesn't eventually catch fire, I'm going to shut it down and do something else. On December 16th, 2023, this is how I played, what I did right, the mistakes I made, and how I can get better. I was seated in seat 1 behind the button in a 2-3 game with $500 behind. If you're new to poker, the seat numbers are named in relation to their location to the dealer's left. The button is the best place you can be when you're dealt a poker hand because you get to decide what you want to do after everyone else has made their decision. The poker term for that is known as getting to act last. Every hand, the button moves 1 position to the left. In order to make people gamble more, the 2 people after the button pay a small penalty, in this case $2 and $3, in order to get dealt a hand. That penalty is called the small blind and the big blind. When you go to a poker room, the people at the table have probably all been playing for a while, and you end up sitting wherever the guy that just left was sitting. You're not allowed to start playing on the button, so the best place to start is right after the button has passed you by, in order to maximize the number of hands you can play before you have to pay the blinds. After 9 hands, everyone will have a chance to be the button. When the button makes its way around the table 9 hands later and ends up in the same position, that is called an orbit. The amount of money you currently have on the table is commonly known as what you have behind. Again, I was seated in seat 1 behind the button in a 2-3 game with $500 behind. Statistically, you should get pocket aces once out of every 221 hands you're dealt. I got them right after my first orbit, on my 9th hand, which is really lucky. If you disagree with what I'm about to say about pocket aces, go down to the comments below, completely roast me and make me feel miserable. With that said, I'm not perfect. You're not perfect, but most importantly, your opponents are not perfect, and taking advantage of their imperfection is what's going to make you money in this game. Having pocket aces doesn't mean your opponent doesn't have a hand that he's willing to go all in with. So, as a general rule, you should always shove pre-flop with pocket aces. Don't bet smaller to get action because something's going to happen in those next 5 cards that you don't expect. With that said, when 2 people limped ahead of me, I promptly ignored my own beliefs and raised to 26, and the button called. Everyone else folded, including those limpers before me. The flop was 2-4-8 rainbow. I checked, trying to trick the player in position into thinking he's ahead, and he bet $65, which I called. The turn was a 2 of clubs, and because of the previous betting between us, we were both pretty sure that the other one did not have a 2. I checked again, letting him lead so I could trap, and this time he bet $95, almost certain I was winning with my 2 pair. I decided to only call the $95, but did not raise. The trap was set. The river was a not-so-fun 7 of clubs, putting 3 clubs on the board, which is now potentially a hand I could lose. I checked, he checked back, I turned over my pocket aces, and he turned over pocket queens. Now I did win the pot, almost $200, which in itself is a pretty nice return, but I could have won $500 had I just shoved my pocket aces pre-flop. For not shoving yet, betting $26 pre-flop to get those players with a 2 out of the pot and winning $190 while failing to win $509, Mr. Creepy gets a grade of C-. Time for Creepy Trivia. You buy a house in 1991 with your wife and subsequently get a divorce in 1999. You stay in the house until the day you die and have virtually no contact with your ex since she moved across the country a decade ago. In the past 25 years, you've had friends, family, and roommates that have received mail at your house. You have a brother that you're in touch with weekly and several local friends that you're in contact with daily. You die in your house either on Wednesday or Thursday, and by the weekend, the people who care about you start saying, "Hey, I wonder what happened to Scott." On Monday, one of them calls the county for a wellness check and the authorities find you dead on the living room floor. Based on this information, who do you think is the emergency contact the county will first reach out to? Is it A, the ex-wife from 3,000 miles away, B, the brother from 100 miles away, C, the close friend with daily contact that called for the wellness check, or D, the ex-roommate who received mail there several years ago? Stay tuned. I'd explained to Scott several times in the past the concept of dead money, and after a few weeks, he actually got it. The concept in itself is kind of simple. For example, if you bet $30, I call and a third person raises to $200. You call that $200 bet and I fold. My $30 is dead money. In that, since I folded, I have no chance of winning, and whomever ultimately wins the hand between you and that third person is going to get that $30 bonus of my dead money. Confused? Let's put it into practice. Now, what I want to do here is, I want to beat the short stack, but more importantly, I want to suck one of those 2 people with a boatload of money into calling my raise. Then when the short stack shoves, I want to overshove, creating dead money. The $90 she has is nice, but it's not what I'm shooting for. It's good to beat her, but I'm going after the big potato, the big money, and even if one of those big guys calls and I'm behind, more than likely the pot odds make it a good play. Unfortunately for me, the 2 pros either know what I'm doing or just don't have a hand in both fold. But exceptionally fortunately for me, I bink a 4 on the river for a full house, beating the flop nut straight of the short stack. There's a guy in seat 8 that looks just like the guy from that TV show Dave, who then feels the need to critique me based on some sort of garbage chart he looked at on the internet. He tells me I'm a great player, and I look him in the eye and agree. For following dead money strategy and attempting yet failing to create a much larger pot, and for not tapping the glass at the table when the fish gets snippety, the grades are as follows. Mr. Creepy, A, F, Dave. I saw my friend Mario over at the 3-5 game, took my chips, put $200 in my pocket, and played $500 over there. After folding an orbit in seat 5, I open limped with ace-king of spades, and when the player to my left raised to $30 and got 2 callers, I then re-raised to $130 with $370 behind, got 2 folds and a reluctant call by the button. With my ace-king and not much money in my stack relative to the current pot size, simple math told me I'd rather see all 5 cards rather than folding after the first 3 if I miss, so I jammed all in. The flop was Jack 8-3, and he called with Ace-Jack, and I was dust. This Mr. Creepy Dust-Off is brought to you by the Broker James YouTube channel. Don't buy a house in California without getting a buyer rebate from Broker James. Contact Broker James to receive your seller disclosure packages for all the properties you're interested in buying sent right to your inbox. What are you, a cop? You can disagree with me if you want, but I like what I did. I don't like the results, and I can live with that. I figured aces, kings, or queens would have raised me pre-flop, meaning I was coin flipping with any pair or way ahead of any ace. If he missed his 3-outer on the flop, he'd fold to a $370 bet with no pair, and mathematically, he hit his 19% chance of winning. Good for him. 3 days after the fact and 2 days before I knew, I took my last $100 for the night and played slots as if my life depended on winning my money back. It didn't, and I didn't. I've got friends, and then I've got a pantload of poker friends. Of those poker people, my best friend is a Napa bail bondsman named Joe. We spent the day Monday going to lunch and recording some video for his business. I told him and Scott I was really excited about making my upcoming first poker vlog. Because of recent events, this is now my poker vlog, and I'll tell you more about that one in a minute. When I was at Joe's house, a number I didn't recognize called, and I let it go to voicemail. When I checked the voicemail a few minutes later, it was from a lady saying she may or may not have the right number. She used to be married to someone named Scott, and if I was his brother, to call her as soon as I can. I am, and I did. When I called her, Scott's ex-wife let me know one of the neighbors did a wellness check and the authorities found him dead that afternoon. Facebook is a great place to find people you're already connected to, and I went there to find other family members to let them know as well. When I went there, I had a few pending chats from people that I didn't know that told me what I had just found out. One of the friends from down the street organized a vigil for that Thursday, and I felt it was a good opportunity to take the 100-mile drive, let the people at Scott's local casino know the news, then drive down the street for the gathering. For a guy that told me he didn't have a lot of family and friends, he had a lot of friends and family. I expected to be one of maybe 10 people to show up. It was closer to 100. Sometimes you hit a jackpot, and sometimes you end up getting kicked in the nuts. Speaking of my nuts, this is Pete. I played a few big hands against him in a session recently, and if you like this story, you'll love my next story, which was originally my first story about him.